verses 13 through 16, and then in chapter 5, verses 7 through 9. And it's in the Black Bible, that would be page 1003. And if you don't have a Bible and you want one, just take this one with you as our gift to you. I'll give you a second. Or if you have a phone, I'll give you time to get it out your iPhone or whatever kind of phone you have and find it. Anyway, chapter 4, verse 13. And no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. Since then we have a high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And in chapter 5, verse 7, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a priest after the order of Melchizedek.
Morning, guys. Hey. All right. I don't know what you're like on long distance trips, but me, I want to get there as fast as possible. So I'm into. It's like a game for me to see how quickly I can get there. So I'll plan hours and hours ahead of time just so I could save just a couple of minutes. And so we're packing food. We're making sure everyone's gone to the bathroom, and we're just going for it. And so on a long distance trip, though, what tends to mess you up is that you have to stop and refuel, right? I mean, so we went to Atlanta last week, and it's over 500-something miles, and my tank maybe holds 300 or something like that. I don't know, so we have to stop for gas, and that slows me down. And anyway, so that I always get irritated. I got to stop for gas, but it's important, or you'll run out of gas and you'll never get there. And so on the way down there, we made decent time, but it wasn't great. 9 hours, something like that. On the way back was incredibly much worse. It was about a 14-hour trip. And I know. Feels sad for me. I need it. So what happened is we get to Nashville. If you know that trip, how that works, just from Atlanta through Nashville, up through Paducah, Illinois here. Anyway, I get to Nashville and it starts to sputter. We stop at a Chick-fil-A or whatever. It starts to sputter. And the engine light pops on, and it's for those who have had transmission problems in the past, you start to. I know it's like I know it's gonna get. I might tear up here, and so I felt it slipping, and so I kind of sputter into this AutoZone. They hook it up to one of the machines, and sure enough, gear 1, 2, and 3 are having problems, and so I'm driving along, and we're sitting there. We have this decision to make. What do we do? Do we press on? Do we keep going? And we're in Nashville, and we do have friends there that we could have stayed with or something like that. And so we're just thinking about it. And then what I found out though is that if I got into 4th and 5th gear, I'd be fine. And which is true. And so I did that. And then I get into 4th and 5th gear, and hey, we're sailing. So I'm like, hey, let's just go for it. We're just gonna go for it. And then we hit a traffic jam, on the outside of Nashville. And then I found out that once I downshifted into 3rd, it gets stuck in 3rd. And so I'm navigating that. And so what I do, I pull over, I turn the car off, let it rest a little bit. The kids play on the playground, and then we get back and we get up in the 5th gear. And then basically for the rest of the trip, everything that could have gone wrong for this to be successful went wrong. And so we get to almost Paducah, Kentucky, and there's this 15-mile stretch of supposed road construction. But basically, just someone put cones out there and made it one lane for apparently no reason. And so we're driving, and, it's sputtering at, get third gear, pull over, kids go to the playground, we hang out for a little bit, get back in the car, we start driving along, we're sailing along, fourth, fifth gear, and then we hit Illinois, and then there's like this torrential rainfall of biblical proportions. People are like on the side of the road, have to slow down again. I'm just like looking at the speedometer, like don't get below 40, don't, and then all of a sudden, boom, downshifts into third, pull over, kids go to the playground, whatever. And I asked the kids later, did you have I had a great trip. We went to so many playgrounds. And I was like, well, that's good for you. And so we keep driving, make it, and, we're going, we make it through Mount Vernon. We're headed to Illinois, and about 15 miles out, we see the arch. It's like the promised land. It's like we're like making it home, and this was the most exciting thing ever. So we get up to St. Louis, close to the Eads Bridge, and there is a semi on Eads Bridge that had stalled out. And we are sitting on Eads Bridge for, 20 or 30 minutes, and I'm popping in and out of first gear. My car's spinning, running. The kids are starting to freak out. I'm making them freak out if they're not freaked out. And dads know what I'm talking about. And there's semis going by, and I have to start the car. That's what you have to do. You have to let it go, you turn the car off, start back. So I'm starting this car back and forth getting over this bridge. I limp over the bridge, so to speak, by the stadium, and by this time, my transmission is just about gone. And going like a few feet, and and the kids are like, hey, can we go home? I'm like, yeah, that'd be nice. Let's go home. Why didn't I think of that? And so from the stadium to about Jefferson and 44, we get to Jefferson and 44. I called a friend of mine, Dan Martinez, who lived just a few blocks away from there. I said, hey, come get the kids. And my wife's like, hey, you don't want me to stay with me? I was like, look, it's better that you go. No one should see me this way. And so they go. It's taken forever to get home. So they go. I'm sitting there thinking, should I get a tow truck? Should I take the car? Should I do that? And I'm like, at that point, and guys, I'm just like, I've got to beat this thing. If I've gotten this far, I'm not gonna give up. So I give it a little rest. I get back up. I actually ramp up onto 44 again. It slips on me. I throw it in neutral. I'm going down the ramp. There's stoplight, and I just go through them. And I'm just like, I go through stoplights and stop signs, and I'm probably gonna have like $400 or $500 in tickets in my mailbox. But it's like I've got to get home. I didn't care. By the way, if you get those things, you need to pay them. Sometimes I hear people say things like you don't really have. No, you should pay them. I heard of one guy who got one of those tickets in the mail. They show you a picture of you breaking the law. And so what he did is he took a picture of a $100 bill and sent it to the police. And so the police, in response, took a picture of handcuffs and sent it back to him. And so the moral of the story there is pay those bills. But anyway, so I go down, I'm in neutral, and Kings Highway, by the way, I found out Kings Highway, it fortunately is on a slant. So you can go pretty far, and so I was like, well, maybe if I can make it to Sutherland and Kings Highway, got a few friends live on that street, I'll park it there. And I put it in gear, and I'm sitting there thinking, and no, go home, go, you got it. So I somehow started, stopped it, kept going, and I made it home. And last night, late at night, getting home. So anyway, I made it home. Here's the point. My car is shot, right? My transmission, it's died. It's gone to auto heaven. Or hell, I think, but heaven maybe. But it's over. Sometimes when you drive and you're trying to make good times, you have to stop over and get gas. But there's nothing I can do to make this car now. I can't, there's no amount of time. I can let it rest. I can put all kinds of gas in it, but until I get it fixed, it's gonna be a hassle. It's gonna be painful. Even if I do try to drive it, it's gonna feel sluggish. It's not gonna make it very far. And I bring that all up just to say this, that our lives are like this. Our lives just, I knew I was going to preach on this morning. I did not know God was going to give me that illustration. I wish that he hadn't, but he did. Anyway, so it's a $3,500 illustration if you just put that in your check. Anyway, if you feel sorry, but it happened to me, so I thought I would share it to you, so I hope you enjoyed it. But life, though, you get in these situations to where, you're moving along, and just the normal course of life, just like with a car, you have to stop and you have to refuel. You have to, check the oil, wipe the windows off, whatever, and you go. And, you can't go forever. We got to take breaks. We have to rest. We have to recharge. We have to, connect with people. We have to connect with God. We have to get that kind of reboot kind of a thing. But sometimes, though, something happens in our life where it just, no matter what we do, we're just parked. I mean, we can try to rev up the engine all we want, but it's just going to sputter. It's going to be long. It's going to be painful. It's going to cause angst, and we just experience this deep pains in life. Things happen in our lives that just cause us to be really sidelined. I know for me, I've had a few of these in my life, but one that really sticks out is about 9 years ago. A family member of mine just was in a very dark situation, and it just felt like my guts were torn out, like the insides were torn out. I felt like I was actually dying myself. It was just this heart-wrenching situation. I mean, I lost my appetite. I didn't eat for days, which for me is a miracle in itself because I never lose my appetite. Like even when I get sick, people lose their appetite when they get sick. I mean, I'll have a fever, I'll be puking, I'll be like, all right, what's for dinner? And just like, I never lose my appetite, but I just couldn't eat for days. It was just one of those things. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, you may be going through a very, very painful situation right now, or if you experienced pain in the past. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. You've not really had those moments yet. I just want to say this, it's coming. That's not a threat. It's coming. You read the book of Ecclesiastes, and that's basically the point of that book, is to tell you that no matter how much you toil, no how much money you make, no amount of accolades, no career advancement, no amount of sexual fulfillment, nothing is going to protect you from the fact that at the end of the day, life is meaningless, and it's a toil, and it all ends in pain and misery. It's pretty kind of an uplifting book. But there's this thing it says in Ecclesiastes. It says, but God has put eternity in our hearts. That God has put in every single one of us this thing that says, but there's something in me that says that I should keep going, that life does have meaning and it does have purpose. Everything in my life, every pain that I experience, all of what life teaches me said that I just wish it would end. But there's, the externals, the circumstances say that, but there's something inside me that says, no, that life does have meaning, life does have purpose. But for most of us, we just kind of keep on trekking. It's kind of like, when the engine light comes in our car. That's not a suggestion, by the way. That's like a warning. That's like something bad's about to happen. And we just ignore it. I do too. And, we have engine lights in our car. We have these pain moments. It's like, hey, look, if you don't stop and process this, if you don't stop and do something about this, major trouble is going to happen. I've got notes for you in your bulletin. If you'd pull those out, just if you're wondering, if you like, the title of this message is How to Lament. How to basically process your pain. And where we're at in kind of the sermon rotation here is that we've done a few topical messages this sermon series this year, and we just went through a few verses in the book of Luke. We're getting ready to head into a section of 1 Corinthians, and then we'll do a bunch of kind of like standalone messages like today, and then in the fall we'll do one called Visionary Love, just about the spills and thrills of marriage, dating, and singleness, and then get into a long series on the book of Colossians. But today I want to talk about how to lament, and there are some default systems that we all have, which basically means there's these check engine lights that can kind of come on that show us actually that we are in pain and we actually need to stop and process this, that we need to stop, we need to lean into God. And here are a few. They all start with D's, which is nice. It says, in your notes here, it says, one is diminish, which means, it's not that bad. I could just get to fourth gear. If I could just kind of keep pressing on here, it's not that bad. One is deflect. I don't want to talk about it. Anybody brings it, I just don't want to talk about it. So if you ever hear yourself saying about a situation, it's not that bad, when someone comes to you like, man, how are you dealing with that? Oh, it's not that bad. That's something in you trying to protect yourself, trying to push down the pain, not processing it. You're just trying to, I want to deflect it. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I know it's bad, but I don't want to talk about it. Deny it. I don't know what you're talking about. You're just like refusing. If I just forget that this actually happened to me when I was 5, if I just forget it, deny that it happened, then it'll all be better. Or just to disengage. Sometimes when pain comes, people just withdraw. They withdraw from community, withdraw from friends. You get depressed. You defend, you get defensive. You actually defend the problem. Here's mine. I dissect. I regret. I knew I shouldn't have done that. If I had only done it, if I would have stopped here, I've already just gone through a million things in my mind about my car just yesterday. If I had done this, I would have thought, oh man, it's so stupid, I should have done this. So you just begin to dissect everything about it. But I actually I don't process it. I don't lean into God. So it's been my experience that people do two major things with pain. Number one, it makes them bitter or it makes them better. Which one do you vote for? You want to get bitter or you want to get better? Let's go for better. Okay. And so sometimes though people do get bitter, they have a painful experience. Something terrible happens to them. Something that no one could say, oh, you should just get over it. I mean, it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, that really happened to you? Sometimes you hear news about a friend like, oh, I can't even believe that happened. You're just like, ugh. Sometimes people experience pain and it just makes them depressed and angry and bitter, and it can go that route. They just ignore it. They just deny, deflect, disengage, defend, dissect. They do one of those things. They never lean into God. They don't lean into their Heavenly Father who made them, loved them, wants to show grace to them. And then I meet others who they go through this circumstance and they actually lay out this horrible set of events, something that you would never want, something you would never wish for, but their testimony is that God did something in those events in a way that what God did in them never could have happened if it hadn't been for those events. So it's almost like I don't want to go through it again, but man, God did so much in my life through that. In fact, I wouldn't even be who I am if that hadn't happened. It's just these monumental, painful things. They actually become defining moments, and God becomes real to them. And like prayer was routine before meals, and now it's like this alive conversation with the Creator of the universe. The Bible comes alive. Not just stories in a galaxy far, far away, but it's just like real people in real life, and they begin to relate to Jesus in a new way. They begin to relate to his sufferings in a new way, understanding the pain he went through, and now I get the cross a little bit better. Many of us may know the story of Joni Eareckson Tada, who as an 18-year-old, she dove into Chesapeake Bay in the 60s, and she misjudged the shallowness of the bay, and she broke some vertebrae and left her as a quadriplegic. And for 2 years, she'll tell you this, she was just depressed and angry and bitter, and it was the first scenario. But then God met her in her pain, and if those who know her story now, she inspires thousands of people. Her books are translated in like 15 different languages. And her life it's just brought on this whole new meaning, this whole new experience. And people always ask her, like, hey, do you wish you could walk? And she's like, of course I wish I could walk. In some ways, she's like, I wish that, in some ways, I wish this hadn't happened to me. I wish I could walk. I wish I have all these things. But here's her real testimony. This is on the screen. This is her quote. She says, I can honestly tell you that I'd rather be in this wheelchair knowing God the way I do, the peace and comfort that he gives, than to be on my feet without him. I can say that with a smile, and that is a miracle. It's just like, man, that's just a horrible thing to have happened. Just like, so much promise, so much there, and then this horrible thing happens. And it's just this thing that actually brought her into this new realm of relationship with God, this new realm of meaning, this new realm of fruitfulness. And it's C.S. Lewis, I love what he says, and he has this little book called The Problem of Pain, which is a great book if you want to book on this. He says this. He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And pain isn't something that's just like, oops, to God. He actually uses that in a profound way, which I don't completely understand that, but God has a way of using our pain to bring about so much good. Now, if you're a skeptic, I mean, maybe what you get out of this message, you're saying, it's just kind of the Christian way to explain, trying to help God out because God presents himself as this loving, gracious person. He's kind of backed himself in the corner, because here's a bad thing that happened to a good person. And so just kind of, this is got to help God. Like poor Christians got to help God out. He backed himself into a corner again, and this is a way of explaining it. But one of the things you'll discover is that if you're really serious about finding out meaning in your own life, you're really serious about discovering who you are, discovering truth, discovering who God is. Is there meaning? Is that one of the things that you'll discover in your own experiences, and as you study the Bible. And I encourage you to do that, is that our painful experiences are no accident. That in a way that God uses these things to really bring about some amazing things, to show us things about ourselves, to show us things about him, and to draw us close in a way that we would never be drawn close to had we not gone through that pain. I mean, I just even think about my own life with my children. I mean, just some of their most painful moments, just like when my kids have gone to the hospital and they've been crying all night and all you can do is hold them. It's just like, those are some of the most precious memories to me, like just all the time that we spent together as I'm holding them and, telling them how much I love them and going on over and over again. And it's just like, why did I have to go through all that pain? But at the same time, they're these sweet moments that really are things that when I look back on, those are the things that I remember. And our Heavenly Father is the same way. He's wanting to use the pain that we have. Paul writes to the Romans, the church in Rome, writes this letter, and this is a very famous passage. It's in Romans 8:28. It says that he works out all things for our good. He's working out the good things. He's working out the bad things to bring about a good thing. James, the brother of Jesus, said in his letter, and if you're a skeptic, you'll love James, because how could, it's one thing if Jesus was to convince other people that he was the Son of God, but it's another thing to convince your brother, right? You grow up with your brother and you wrestle and you kind of, and your brother comes like, hey, I'm the Son of God. It's like, whatever. And it's like, but his was a brother. In fact, James didn't believe. He wasn't a follower until after the resurrection. Yeah, I could see he's doing miracles and that's fine, but he's my brother. And I see he do all these amazing, yeah, he's my brother. Okay, he rise from the dead. All right, you got me. If you can predict your death and predict that you're going to rise from the dead, and then you actually do that, I'll believe what you say. And so he writes this letter, and he says this in his opening chapter. He says, "Consider it a pure joy." This is crazy. "Consider it a pure joy, my brothers, when you experience trials of many kinds." Consider it a joy when you go through something that's just so painful that you just feel like your insides are going to explode. How are you ever going to get through this? Why did this happen to me? Deep, dark, ugly, painful things. Consider it a pure joy because it produces faith, it says. It produces this closeness and connection, this robust connection with the God of the universe. And at the end of the day, whether you track with this statement or not, at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. And God's wanting to draw you close. So today I want to talk about how we process pain. I want to talk about what it really means to lean into God. What does it mean to take something to God in prayer? If you're a Christian, you've heard that. Or even if you're not a Christian, you've probably heard that. Have you taken it to God in prayer? What does that mean? What does it mean to take something to God in prayer? How do you take your issues to God? How do you take your pain to God? And so that's what we're going to talk about. The passage we read is in Hebrews 4. And if you have I hope you have your Bible open to that. We're going to look at that passage, and then we'll flip over to Matthew here in a second. And you can follow along in your notes if you like. There's a few things that I'll point to as well. First of all, this passage in Hebrews tells us why we should take our pain to God. It says that no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him that we must give an account. I think part of the reason what makes us difficult to process our pain is that we really don't want to talk about it. We don't want to we don't want to articulate to other people. We just I don't feel like explaining myself again. I don't feel like talking about this again. It's too painful to bring up, or maybe you just don't feel like you have the words, like you can't, you don't have the right language and nuance the language enough so people can understand. It's like, I just don't want to talk about it. So part of the reason why people don't process their pain is it's like, I have to explain myself, and that in itself is too painful. Here's the great thing about God. He knows it already. He knows. I mean, you can put secrets up there with the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus because they don't exist. He knows it all. I mean, this is what David in the Psalms was both rejoicing and lamenting. He said, where can I go from your presence? Like if I climb to a mountain, you're there. If I go to the depths of the sea, you're there. The things that you tell everyone, he knows that. The things that you keep to yourself that nobody knows, the deepest, darkest, he knows us too. He knows. So here's the great thing about taking things to God. He already knows. You don't have to explain yourself. He knows the situation. He was there. He knows your pain. He knows it. Second thing, it says that he sympathizes in chapter 4, and we'll explain this some more or explore some more detail, but he understands and he sympathizes. We don't have a God who's removed from us, who's isolated, who doesn't know exactly what we're going through, who hasn't been frightened by every fear, who hasn't been beset with every anxiety, depressed by every worry. It says we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize, yet he encountered these situations without failing and losing hope. And so we can be confident in approaching Jesus in our time of need because we know that he understands. I mean, that's another big thing. It's like, I don't know that anyone would understand what I'm going through. We'll get into this in a second, but Jesus really does understand. He went through the deepest, deepest pain. And because he understands, we can go to him in our time of need. Maybe you're here this morning, you are in a time of need. This is you're there, or maybe you're getting ready to be there, or you were there and you haven't fully gotten through it, or you have a friend. I mean, this is the amazing thing about God. We have a high priest who understands, and because he understands, he's able to give us grace. He doesn't stand over us and say, "Hey, when are you going to figure it out? When are you going to, you're a mess. Come on, I did it. Why can't you?" But he understands. He knows exactly what we're going through. And because he understands, he can give us grace and mercy. He had to process his own pain. Jesus was not exempt from pain. In fact, if you know anything about the cross, you know the depth of the pain physically, emotionally, but most importantly, spiritually. Just absolute rejection. And that's what we're going to read about in Hebrews 5, 7 through 9. That was the second part. It says, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications. Supplications are requests. This is like, God, I don't want this situation. He just was honest with it. He just, God, take me out of the situation. And tears, loud cries and tears. Have you ever been in a situation where all you could do is just scream to God and in tears? Take this away from me. I just don't want to be here. That's where Jesus was. And then it says, although he was a son, he learned obedience. Which means that God didn't take away the pain. There's something God had in even for Jesus in that. In being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So these verses are referencing a time in Jesus' life that's really kind of mystical and interesting. And if you're new to your Bible, it's the Garden of Gethsemane. And it's interesting about this event because there are hundreds of prophecies surrounding the death of Jesus and his resurrection in the Old Testament. You could see it coming a mile away. But there's no reference to this event in the garden. This absolutely blindsided Jesus. This was one of those things that was just like, what is happening to me? And if you've ever gone through a painful situation, it's like you're blindsided by it. It's like you didn't expect to feel the way you feel. And this is what we're going to read about. So if you could do this, if you could flip over to the left of Matthew 26. Matthew 26, page 832 in those black Bibles. So you just flip over there real quick. We're just going to look at this story in the garden and pull a couple things out of it, and then I'll give you some homework. It started out like a sermon, but it's going to end like school, so sorry about that. So here we are, Matthew 26, verse 36. Here we go. Then Jesus went up to them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here a while I go over there and pray." And taking with them Peter and the sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. So here's what happens. He begins to experience pain, and he does something that he never does in the Bible. You read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's a lesser known gospel. But it's there. And anyway, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these are accounts of Jesus. You'll never, ever read. What you will never read is Jesus ever asking for help, but he's asking for help. He says to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." So let me just kind of pull this into our situation. He goes to this event. You've experienced this pain, and the only thing you know to do is you begin to just cry out to God, and sorrowful and tears and loud, and then you pull your closest friends together and say, you got to be with me. You got to support me. You got to be around me. And that's what he does. And then it says, and going a little farther, he fell on his face, prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to them, "Peter, so could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray." I mean, you can even see, just the human, I just want to pause here. The humanity of the situation. I mean, there's a little bit of disappointment in Jesus' voice. "Hey man, I'm really going through something here. Can you drink some coffee, stay awake. Watch and pray that you may not enter temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak." And again, for the second time, he went and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink, your will be done." And then it says then he kept praying. It says he prayed for a third time. And this is Jesus just going to the Father saying, "Take this away from me. I don't want to experience this." And you've been in something where it's just like, "God, take my situation away from me. I don't want this. I know, you're sovereign, I know you work. You're going to work out all things. It's your will, but God, take this away. If it's possible, take this away from me." This pain so bewildering Jesus, so confusing him. The grief, the shame, the sorrow of all the sin of the world beginning to fall upon him. And he just became depressed, and he was in despair, anxious. And then we'll read here in Luke, it says that he's at a loss because it says it in Luke 22, you don't need to turn there, Luke 22, 43 to 44, actually it might be in your notes. It says, "And there appeared to him an angel in heaven strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling from the ground. He felt so hopeless, so discouraged. And he began to cry out in almost involuntary cries, just agonizing cries. And his heart just felt like a wine press, his heart just being squeezed. And he just was so distraught that it says his sweat fell from his forehead like great drops of blood. Just in utter agony. "God, take this away from me. Take this pain away from me." And the writer of Hebrews and the writer of the Gospels just go through great lengths. I don't know if you picked up on this or not, just in your own study of the Bible, but they go to great lengths to show you just the humanity of Jesus, just how much he felt pain, just how low he went. For a lot of reasons, one of these reasons is so that you would know that you do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with what you're going. You do not have a God who is distant. You have a God who is other, who is transcendent, who is like no other. But yet this God who was other took on flesh and became one of us. And becoming one of us didn't mean like he just got the good parts and escaped the bad parts. But he took on all of us. He took on our pains. He took on our suffering. He took on our poverty. In fact, he took on our pain in a deeper level than we would ever experience. If you get anything out of today, because sometimes, especially if you're going through pain, you don't want to hear how to be better. You don't want to hear, just trust. I mean, it's just like, I'm in pain, man, but here's what you can take out of today. God genuinely, authentically understands. I may not understand. I've gone through some bad stuff, but I may not be going through what you're going through. But I do know that Jesus has. I do know that he went through a depth of pain. And in the garden, he processed that pain, which is, man, it can be an example for us. Jesus really does understand. So here's a few observations that you might want to jot down. What do we learn from this? One is that we learn that Jesus took his pain to the Father, and he was honest. If I was to do a message on prayer, in fact, you guys have heard me do messages on prayer, it's kind of like, hey, look, let's not have prayers all be about you, and let's get outside the box a little bit and think about other people. But actually in this passage, Jesus he brought his request. He didn't come and say, God save the world. He says, God, I take this pain away from me. And I just want you to know, if you're in this painful situation, I want you to know it is an amazing thing for you just to go home today and be honest with God and say, God, this is how I feel, and this is what I'm going through, and just if you take it away, God, take it away. He was able to do that. He was honest. It's okay that you're angry or sad or distressed. We need to get beyond that, but it's the starting point. Just being honest with God. Secondly, we see that he processed pain in community. He tried to include his friends. Now check this out. Were his friends helpful? Actually, they weren't. They weren't helpful. That's kind of the tricky thing here. In my experience, when I've gone through painful things, my friends have been incredibly helpful. And I think for the most part they are. But I think one of the reasons this is in here, one of the reasons these events are in here, is that Jesus wanted us to know that even though our friends disappoint us when we need them the most, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't include them. In fact, after this whole scenario happened, Peter denies him. And after all that, Jesus went back and he sought to restore. He showed up to his friends. He didn't go off and find a new group of friends. He went back to the same friends who could not stay awake in his darkest hour. He went to Peter specifically. And he wanted to make sure that he knew that, hey, we're still friends. I just want to say that even though maybe you're hurting right now and you hurt in the past and you took it to your friends and your friends just blew it. Don't use that as a reason to say, okay, well now I just won't include friends anymore because they blew it. No, look, Jesus' friends blew it. They blew it big time. They couldn't stay awake. They didn't know what was going on. And that was a part of it. A lot of it is sometimes your friends really just don't understand. Doesn't mean that you don't include them though. Jesus 3 times said, hey, come on guys. I need you. You need friends. You need to draw into community. If you're going through something painful, don't bypass your friends, even if you've had bad experiences. Jesus teaches us that we still need our friends. Thirdly, God sent an angel to comfort him, and God will comfort you. When you lean into God, he will bring angels. He'll bring his very spirit to comfort you. You will find strength in God. If you go to him with your pain, you will find strength. Now, if you're looking at verse 44, what happened when the angels came? He got strength, but what happened next? It got worse. Jesus was strengthened, but his agony got worse. And actually, he then went to the cross and was beaten and mocked. And it got a whole lot worse than it did in the garden. And here's one of the things that I know it's confusing and I know it doesn't make sense and we wouldn't do it this way. But here's the deal, is that a lot of times when we go to God, even in our painful situations, what we want is we want God to take away our pain. Jesus did too. Hey, if it's possible, take this away from me. It's a human thing to not to want to experience pain. But God may not take it away. In fact, he probably won't. He'll strengthen you. He'll do something miraculous. For Jesus, it ended up redeeming the whole world. That's pretty significant purpose. your pain does have a purpose. The issue isn't that we experience pain with God. The real tragedy is that we experience pain without God. That we just experience pain for no reason. That we just go through painful situations over and over and over and over and over again. But we never lean into God. We never press into God. We never approach him with this. We just continue to experience this pain. And so when we go to God, sometimes he doesn't take it away. In fact, most of the time, he won't. But he does have a purpose in it. I read this in Christianity Today. This is an old, from the 90s quote. But it was, if you guys are familiar with Nate Saint and Jim Elliott and that whole deal, these were missionaries in the 50s that went to this tribe in Ecuador, and they ended up getting speared. They went to go reach this people, and they never got to take the gospel to them, and they got speared before it ever happened. But what ended up happening is it was an event that led to this tribe coming to Jesus. And Nate Saint's son, Steve Saint, wrote this in the article. He had just gotten new details about the spearing of his dad. And in hearing these new details, he discovered that actually this was an improbable event. Like, this event shouldn't have happened. It's like so many weird things had to happen for this event to actually happen. But it did happen. And this is what he says. He says, as they, this is the this Alka tribe, as they described their recollections, it occurred to me how unlikely this event was. It only could have happened. It only could have happened. It couldn't have happened outside of divine intervention. In other words, this son was saying, God made this happen. God orchestrated these events. God orchestrated the events that led to the spearing of my dad. But God used it. God used this thing to do a miracle in many people's lives. And here's the thing, that God, we go through painful situations, but we don't go through painful situations without purpose. In fact, what I've learned is the deeper the pain, the bigger the purpose. That when you start to go through painful things, that God, you can count on that God has a purpose in it. That God's going to do something through it that's going to be so much more greater than if you didn't go through it. And I know when you're going through it, you know, you just want it to go away, and that's great. I mean, I'm that way, and nobody wants pain. Nobody wants these situations to happen. But if we lean into God, if we lean into him, he can really, really show us comfort, and he can show us what his will is. He can give us purpose, and he can turn it into an amazing thing to where one day you'll have a story where it's like, you know what, I never want to experience that again. But I can't imagine my life having not gone through that. And here's the deal, guys. We want to be a community that's really there for each other, that's loving, processing pain together. And here's what I want to do. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I do want you to feel ministered to. I do want you to begin to lean into God. And if you feel like you've got, there's a pain that you're going through, maybe it's a past pain, maybe it's a current pain. Would you just raise your hand? Would you just, like you're going through a pain? Would you just raise your hand? And if you raise your hand, would you just stand, please? I know I tricked you, but would you, if you're around these people, I'm just going to pray, just going to